Hi, and welcome to the Louder Than Silence podcast with your host, C.G. Wagner. This is the second episode of our new series, From Survivor to Leader. For this series, the other staff members and I are having discussions about all things LTS and what it means to be leading the work in long-term care for survivors of sexual violence. It's a mix of our own personal experiences, the work our team does, and how those two things impact each other. Our hope is that survivors feel seen and validated, and supporters gain a deeper understanding of what this healing process is like. With me today, I have our program manager, Joe, our social media manager, Christy, and our development manager, Brittany. Thank you, ladies, for joining me today for episode 2. Very exciting. So, this episode is building authentic community. So, we're going to just jump right into this. We're doing it. So the very first question is, in your opinion, what is the difference between sympathy and empathy in community building?
Yes, I was thinking about how for me, like empathy is just like what I do. So it's like, how do I think of sympathy? Because I feel like to me, it's just I jump to empathy. And I think that the difference is that in when people are sympathizing, that it's like they see that there's pain and they're acknowledging that there's pain, but they don't actually like want to feel that the pain. Like they're not personally like getting in it with you and like sitting with the pain and asking for more information or like wanting to a level of like putting themselves in your shoes so they really know what it feels like. I think for a lot of survivors, we automatically empathize because like we know what trauma feels like in the body. So our bodies are automatically like, oh yeah, no, I know that sensation. I can totally empathize. But yeah, that's the difference in my mind.
Um, that's really good. I to kind of build off of that, I think of sympathy as being like that places somebody as at a distance, right? They're like distance from whatever they're observing. So they're observing someone's pain from the outside, um, kind of feeling sorry for them or uh, like not in it. And then with empathy, I look at empathy as someone who comes and sits down and sits and says, I see and I'm here and I can empathize. I understand, I can see why it would feel this way. You don't necessarily have to agree with it, right? Because that's the empathy word is like a buzzword for not being okay. But it's recognizing like I could see how you could come to this conclusion. And the other thing that I think sympathy creates is like this hierarchy of um, of basically it positions someone as whole, looking down on someone as broken. And where and empathy gets to come in and say, oh no, yeah, it's like a level playing field and we're all on it. And we felt that way.
Oh, Christy, I love that. And honestly, I don't know if before LTS that I would have been able to answer this question with very much clarity. Um, and for me, when building a community, empathy is necessary. I think sympathy is like I think it's important, like for human beings to be able to have sympathy, to be able to see when people are hurting. In community, specifically in a community like LTS, I think empathy is necessary. It draws us near to one another. As both Joe and Christy have said, we all have experienced some form of like the pain of sexual violence and not only the pain from the act, but also like the domino effect of the aftermath and how it falls all over all of the other parts of our lives and how that affects, those around us, and especially people we love. And when we have empathy for one another in community, that we meet each other right where we are, right where the person next to us is, and there's not shame or judgments that equal playing field. We just see each other and we hold the space. Nobody is fixing anyone or anything. We just sit in it, and that's because we know.
I love all of those answers. And I feel like each of you kind of hit something that I was going to say. So I'm like, oh no, it's going to go to me, and then we have to figure out the answer now. But I think for me, what I realized as I was like hearing all of your answers is actually connected to when I do these like trainings around having hard conversations, that one of the specific things that I recommend is not saying, I can't imagine. And so I feel like the difference is like sympathy is that I can't imagine, right? It's this like intellectually over there kind of idea. And the empathy is, oh, I can imagine. It is like, okay, I might not know all of the exact nuance and specifics and details of exactly what you went through, but I can imagine what that was like. And it's like meeting people with that energy of, yes, like I am willing to go there and say I can imagine what that would be like and what that would feel like and how that would impact me. Um, versus the like, all right, I will create that space from this concept. Which I think is just another way of saying what all of you brilliantly said already. So, um, so then connected thought to that, our next question is, how do you see LTS creating these safe spaces for survivors to connect? How are you seeing that empathy like truly showing up and manifesting in our work?
Yeah, I think that we part of the one thing that I say is like a space is only as safe as we each make it. So like if somebody comes into a space that we've cultivated to be safe, but that person is not safe, well now the whole space isn't safe. So there's a lot of like teaching people what it looks like to show up and empathize. Like some people, like I was saying, like I genuinely just like do that. And so I had to like kind of be like, okay, how do I think about the difference? But like running groups, like there are times where you have to like remind people like to stop, don't jump to judgment statements, or don't intellectualize, or don't separate yourself from their experience just because their experience is different. Like sit in it with them. And so like that's why when we do our cohorts we have our guidelines, because it's imperative that we explain to people involved like how they can be safe people, because like I said, if they are showing up and are not knowing how to hold that space, then like it ruins the whole space that we have worked so hard to create. So I think a lot of it is, the biggest thing with LTS is like we are here to meet you where you're at, but then like we also want the community to stay safe. So finding a way to like teach people like, hey, this is actually how you do it better. Like this is actually how you show up for someone else. Or do you see how when you said this phrase, like going back to that specific phrase of I can't imagine, well, how that can feel dismissive. Like, no, sit in it, imagine it with me. Like, tell me how you can relate. So just teaching people like those little things of like, stop, imagine what it would be like, sit in it, don't say something to make yourself feel better or to fill the air. I know that part of it in running groups can be like, hey, it's okay for it to be silent. Like we all can have that, like, this is so uncomfortable, no one's talking. But to learn like, yeah, sometimes life's uncomfortable and like that's okay. Better to let it be uncomfortable and safe than to like out of a fear of just the uncomfort to like say something dumb that then harms the community around you.
That's really good. Um, to build on that, I think one of the things that we've done at LTS is it's things like the programming, the groups, the events, those things have been designed intentionally that way for a reason. And so one of the things that I remember thinking about when I was thinking about this question is like a safe place requires more than good intentions. It does require intentional design. And so when I think about that intentional design, I think about, the participants being able to come in and know that the boundaries will be respected, and that those boundaries are respected so that there isn't a re-traumatization of an individual who's participating, or they won't be re-traumatized. It's 2 o'clock. Or it's like certain times of the day where my brain doesn't want to work. It's most of them. But it's also knowing, that they're as much as we are able, they're going to be honored at each turn, right? Like in regards to their own autonomy. If someone doesn't feel comfortable, that's why we have so many different avenues to have community. It's someone may not be comfortable in this particular space, or they might be comfortable in the peer-led group, but going into another setting, it may take a while for them to come to an event. What else was I going to say? Oh, one of the things I had written down was like the way, and because I had thought about it, it's like the way that survivors' voices are centered in what we're doing, and it's really is, there's a thought process in that, and it comes into play in every decision. So from like the survivor-led programming to the peer support models to even those trauma-informed practices that we have molded in our practice of what we do, where, like Joe said, like we're okay with sitting in the uncomfortable silence because sometimes we need some of that. And so safe doesn't always mean comfortable. I think that's important. But it can be a place where like we're challenged without judgment, where we can experience like the discomfort of growth, but be free from like that danger of harm. Does that make sense? Like it can be uncomfortable to experience this growth, and yet like all of those different components that go in to make that place safe, like those different elements are going to be supported. Love.
Yeah, I agree completely with both of you. And it's interesting that my first LTS cohort or workshop was the first time that I had personally sat with a group of people and felt completely safe to be me. In the past, it might have been that I felt safe if there was this other version of me, but being authentically, truly, completely me, completely seen as I am, um, it's something it's hard to put words to. It's hard to articulate that feeling. It's life changing. And CG built that space because you were my cohort leader. um, in these groups, strangers quickly become more than strangers, and each person there met me and accepted me right where I was. And I think that the clear boundaries that are defined for everybody in the cohort, from like securing, establishing that there's anonymity for participants, to like requesting permission to ask questions. Like, is it okay if I ask a question? Or, is would you prefer that I just listen? To see what the speaker, the other participant needs in that moment. Um, and that rolls over to LTS retreats as well. Just a large group of women. Many of them like might know each other or have like crossed paths, or may not know each other at all. They show up for a weekend together, and there's zero expectations apart from like being respectful and being kind and honoring these boundaries. And one of the things I loved was my first retreat, realizing that each participant can do as much or as little with the group or in the session that feels good and safe for them. And I remember doing it was like a 1-day retreat, and there was an activity, and I felt like just a little jarred. It was like a little louder than I had the capacity for that day. And I still had that kind of nervous feeling about like, oh, I'm not going to do this. But I knew I was like, I'm going to try it. And then I was like, yeah, not for me right now. And I stepped out and it was just completely fine. Like there was, and even I had a friend and that day and she texted, she's like, oh, I didn't get to say goodbye. Like, have a good week. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I left early, unnecessarily apologizing. And she's like, girl, you do you, and that's what the community is, and does for one another. We just hold that space of like whatever it is you need that's best for you in this any given moment. And I truly feel with my whole heart that the world needs more spaces like LTS provides.
I would love to share a story if I can. So at the last retreat, at that point, I was on staff and I was helping. CG and I were like kind of piggybacking, like you run this one and I run this one. And there was one that I just knew like that's gonna touch on all my stuff, so I'm not doing this one. And kind of like you, I was like, okay, I want to be open minded, so I like sat through the person explaining what it was, and then I was like, yeah, no, hard pass. And so I just like, and here I am, one of the few people on staff at the retreat, but I just got up, walked out, did something for myself in that time. And I remember CG said that a couple people were like, oh, where's Joe? And she's like, she also is a survivor. She also decides what parts she participates in. And she's also allowed to just like, yeah, this one is not for me. And like, that isn't just something we do for participants. Like that's something that we hold as like part of our core values. And so that it also includes like for me, like if this is going to not be helpful, which the whole point is for us to heal each other and to support each other. Oh, if this is not going to be helpful, then I get to step out, and that's totally fine. And everyone knows that that's fine. So that level of autonomy is very important, especially when we're talking about survivors who like that's the reason we're here. Someone stepped on our boundaries, our autonomy. And then the other things that I pointed out, or that I forgot to say earlier, Brittany, you talked about like the confidentiality. Everybody who shows up knows like we're not going to share their name. We're not going to say what happened to them out. Like this is a safe space, and nothing that happens or is said in that space is going to be aired outside of the space. I think that's huge. And the other thing is that we believe survivors. So many people come into our space and have shared with someone and were questioned or were like, well, are you sure that that's how it happened? No, we 100% believe survivors. What they say is what happened is what happened. That is their lived experience, and we believe their experience. And I think that to be believed is like a core part of feeling safe.
Christy, did you want to add something there? I saw you went off mute for a sec. Oh, I think Christy froze. All right, well, we're waiting for Christy to unfreeze. I think the through line that I see and I hear is what you just touched on, Joe, this idea of like the autonomy, the agency for each person. That using again the retreat as the example, one of the things I say is like you can decide to just lay in bed the whole weekend. Like that is totally like if that is the most healing like thing that you could do, then like do it, right? Like it's not like yes, we have things scheduled, but it is really truly wanting what is best for the survivor and allowing that person to make the call. And like we offer what we offer, but it is not a like, well, you have to do this. It is a like here is what we are offering with open hands, and you get to decide. Are you picking it up? Are you taking it from us and like doing your part with it too? And and that is through the whole process. Even when people like come to us for the first time, like I have many times said to people like, I hope that you'll want to engage with Louder Than Silence and that you'll find it to be a healing space. And also, if you find something that's a better fit, like congratulations, you're doing the work, like that's a win. Like it doesn't have to be that it is like shoehorn yourself into what we offer. It is a like we wanted to appear as a gift, truly, to people, and for people to know themselves well enough to say, like, yes, this is the thing that I want to participate in. So that's like a big part of what comes to mind. But I think the other part too is a huge part of this thread is the like non-judgmental awareness piece for ourselves and then also for each other, right? Because we're all in this process of like untangling and understanding ourselves and like learning our coping strategies and like how we want to like change and move forward and all those things. And like that is intense, heavy, challenging work that nobody can do perfectly, right? And so it is saying like I see my desire to do this well and each other's desire, right? Like we can see it and say like, yeah, I that is a decision that they made that they had the option of making, and just because I might not have made that for myself doesn't mean that that is wrong or bad or that we will judge. It is a great, they are figuring themselves out and we are here for that process, whatever that process looks like for them. So it's really important to make sure that that judgment doesn't, creep into the space. All right, Chrissy, are you back with us now? Do you want to chime in? No.
So it was me freezing. I couldn't tell if I froze or if y'all froze. No, I was just saying, what's so pivotal about it is that when those different things are followed, it creates a place for vulnerability without being exposed. Right. And I think there's a difference in having vulnerability and sharing what you choose to share, or you revealing what you choose to reveal versus someone exposing what they think you need to be working on, or whatever that might be. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. That it is not anybody making the decisions on somebody else's behalf for what is divulged or not. Yeah, that's huge.
I I feel like as like a facilitator, that can be really hard because there's times where people will come and like say, they're complaining about the same thing, and one of the things is like we don't give advice. Like we don't give unsolicited advice. Like they'd have to specifically ask like what should I do? And even then you want that. Again, we're all about autonomy. Like I'm not going to say this is what you have to do. I can be like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? But it can be really hard to kind of reel in your own stuff, to not just be like, leave the guy already, or like, or quit your job, it's a terrible job, or whatever it is that like I may perceive as the outside looking in and only hearing whatever specifics that they're telling. But we try to hold the space of like it's a lot more complicated, and again they have autonomy. The choices that they make affect their life, so they're theirs to make. But yeah, as somebody who like starts to care about these people and does this work, it's really hard to just like sometimes you just button your lip and be like, what do you think you should do?
My favorite that I'll use just in practice in my office is like, well, does it feel negative, neutral, or positive? As you think about it, what does that feel like? Because then that helps them say, okay, I don't like how this feels, or, oh, I don't really have a feeling about it, or I feel okay about it. And that makes a big difference. Yeah.
And there's also the flip side of that we touched on in the last episode of the like, we're not here to give permission either, right? Like, it's not like our role or our space to be like, oh, yes, of course you can do that thing, right? Like, we want to support each other, but we're not here to allow it for somebody else, right? Like, and having having that clear boundary of like, no, like we are peers here. Like I don't have an ability to make a decision about your life for you, any of those things. You get to make the decision, and I am here with you as you make that decision or not, right? Like it is totally like I guess not making the thing they're thinking about doing is also a decision, but like um just the I'm here for it and you're doing you. Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes me think of how we ended it with the like, you don't have to conform to be in a safe community, right? So, like, if they make choices that we may be like biting our teeth, going, no, don't pick that one, they can still know that, like, we're going to show up the next week and be like, how are you doing with this decision? And listen wholeheartedly and allow, like, whatever repercussions for their choices to still like hold space for them, that even if we might think like that wasn't the best choice for them, that we're going to still support them through whatever choices they make.
This conversation makes my heart so happy. Just like hearing this like unfolding of what this has looked like. Because it's all like yes, we're talking about like the bigger picture, but we're all talking about the things that have resonated with us, right? Like the things that have actually mattered for us when we've been in these spaces. And so I appreciate just like hearing the breadth of like recognizing all these different components and like what it's meant to have them all together in these spaces. So, oh, makes me happy. Um, all right, so I'm gonna jump into the next question, which is creating safe spaces is dependent on those building them to be in a healthy place. What does it look like for you to balance your own personal healing with the work that you do?
It's funny reading this one because I'm like, am I in the healthiest place? And I think that like compared to the version of me 4 years ago, like yes, okay, I'm in a very much healthier place. But we also don't expect perfection, and to know that like I am a work in progress. And the fact that I am continuing to work is the healthy, like that I will never achieve healthy. And so I do like to just like live out loud. Like I'm an example because I'm like, yeah, this is my mess. This is how I am still managing this response that is unhealthy. And I know it's unhealthy, but I'm still working through it. Um, and one of the things that I had to start navigating was the like figuring out my own boundaries, having healthy boundaries with like work, and then knowing how to do some self care, like if a trigger comes up around this topic, because sitting in this, uh, you can only tolerate so much, and so there came a point where I started to like see my own bandwidth limits and had to like learn like, okay, this is what I can do and this is what's too much on me. Which is kind of a new skill set for me. Something that it wasn't until about this year that I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm gonna text on this and then I'm going to mute these messages after 5 o'clock because maybe I shouldn't sit in someone else's trauma all the time. Like maybe I need to turn this off and have some recoup time, and just figuring out what it looks like for me to have a balanced life and have a life outside of this work, and yet have the strength and ability to like fully engage when I'm actually doing the work.
Yeah. Do you mind for the listeners just clarifying one point? You said about like not having the tolerance for it. Um, can you explain when you say that, like what that actually like means for you?
Um, I think of like, so I'm a mom. I have 5 kids. And like there are those days where like you didn't sleep well and the kids are like screaming and you're just like, I can't handle any more stimulation. I'm gonna go hide in the closet. every parent has had at least one moment where they're hiding in the closet away from their kids. The key is to like do the self-care before you hide in the closet, and then you won't end up in the closet. And so with this situation, or with this type of work, I think it's very similar to like how you have to navigate being a parent. Like when people are looking at you asking for your help or wanting to share parts of their story that are just harder emotionally to sit in, because like I said, I empathize. I'm going to feel their pain in my body, and I can only tolerate emotional distress for so long. I am a human. We all have our like limitations of how much we can tolerate. And so instead of getting to the point where I'm hiding in a closet being like, work, stay out there, finding a way of like, okay, I need a good night's sleep. Okay, I need to tell so and so who wants to talk for the fourth time that I can't talk for a couple days because I just need a break. But figuring out how to do that, because I genuinely like, you build these relationships where you want to show up for the person, but you have to figure out how to show up for yourself and take care of yourself before you just give too much.
That's really good. I utilize, first of all, I have really rigorous boundaries. So I call it like ethical selfishness. And I'm pretty serious about just protecting my capacity, to be able to protecting that capacity so that I can show up, saying no to things that I feel like would deplete, or saying no or saying yes to things that I think would add to, kind of like Joe, like whenever I used to facilitate groups, then when I went back to school, like that looked different for me, right? Because then then that's when I noticed like I had to really have some different boundaries, or being done with school and then being in whatever private practice, like it looks different because oftentimes in the course of my day I am sitting in different things. And so once 2:00 hits, I am generally like out the door, and it is not on my radar. None of the things are on my radar. I'm running kids every which direction. That is what's on my radar. But it also helps me protect that capacity because, like Joe, I'm very empathetic. Like, oh, let me add on one more person today. Let me do this one phone call. Let me take care of this. And it's not that you can't take care of those things, but you do have to recognize like what is my window of tolerance at the moment? Because am I showing up for this person? Like, it's not about showing up in perfection or showing up in any kind of perfect way. It's more, am I showing up for this person in a place of wellness, right? For them, where I'm not crumbling, right, on the inside. Not that you can't show up with like some crumbles, but it's more, when you're going to show up for someone, especially I think it's so prevalent with what LTS says because of the intentionality behind everything. Right. And so it's not just, I'm going to go to this thing and put a smile on, like that. That is not happening. And so because of the intentionality, it's like, okay, what am I, like the birthday party coming up, what am I going to do to prepare for, what that looks like that day? And so I'm going to start preparing for that a couple of days in advance, just those social interactions and that kind of stuff, so that I'm not hit with like depletion. The other thing that I was kind of thinking of in regards to this was, some of the things I do is like creative movement or yoga, or I have my own therapist. Like those are ways that I protect that those boundaries that I have found that work well for me. Or, hey, do you want to lead a group? I would love to lead and CG knows this about me. I would love to lead a group. Let me look and see what day of the week I could whatever, do the thing on, and then I get there, or I actually don't get there. Like I get to the point where I'm like thinking through it. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. This is just a weird season, right? Where you have a high school student and an elementary student and you're running all the directions. And I'm like, and I'm doing it, full time. And so I'm like, okay, wait, maybe that does look different right now. And so then when she had mentioned mentoring, then that opened up a totally different door, right? To where I was like, oh, I do have the capacity for that. So it's kind of finding like what would be a healthy expression of this healing work that I want to be present in, um, and be available for others, and others, be available for me because of the friendships you do build in this. And what does that look like? And I think, the different options are how it looks.
Yeah, I want to add on to the theme of giving too much. And I think um, it's probably something that survivors tend to do. I personally tend to go until I'm empty, and you learn. Sometimes it takes a long time to learn this, but you learn that it's just not sustainable. Um, so what I learned through LTS was that I needed to consistently check in um, with myself about my feelings, my energy levels, and my capacity. And I also learned through LTS to observe my emotions, like without judgment, and to observe my responses and feelings. And it's been very healthy for me. Balancing work and life, y'all have touched on this, and it's a big one. It's hard to keep work boundaries, and especially if you whatever work you have, but as an entrepreneur, it's extremely difficult, especially if you keep very strange hours or your work does. But it's important. It's important for you personally. It's also important so that other people learn that this isn't how the world has to operate. And I'm learning to do this more and more. I'm learning to do it better with my work at LTS, and I'm really grateful for that. Um, and I also have a like super kick-ass therapist. Very helpful.
Oh, I was going to add in, when we honor our own healing process, we're actually modeling that for survivors, other survivors, that, hey, your healing matters also. Right. And so when we're honoring that in ourselves, we're able to model that it's okay for them as well.
Yes, that's been an interesting part for me, that like specific concept. As when you start a thing, right? Like when I started LTS, I was the only one doing the work, right? And so the concept of I want to show up for people, and like I can't literally do every single thing that needs to be done all the time. So what does that look like to demonstrate the like we are allowed to like create space for ourselves? And um and I what came to mind after I wrote this question was one of the ladies in our community about a year ago. She was like, "Can you tell me what your boundaries are around like your cell phone?" She's like, "Because I think that that might help me." And like as I started going through, I'm like, "Oh, I have so many boundaries like just around that I hadn't like I knew because I had created them, but like I hadn't ever just like sat down and been like, here's all of the things." But it is realizing what drains my energy the most and making sure there's the most like padding and margin around that thing. So like if I get stressed out, if I'm getting texts at, you know, 11 p.m., well then the move is to not know that I got the text because I'm not checking my phone at 11 p.m. Right? Like work doesn't need to happen at 11 p.m. And allowing that to be okay, right? Like allowing for the like we don't do crisis intervention here, right? And so we are demonstrating the like this is what it looks like to have balance in our lives. This is what it looks like for me to do that. And since I am quite introverted, a lot of that is like time away from people, which is ironic because like I built this thing for helping people and I love to help people and I love that that's part of what I do. And I need to like go play in the dirt in my garden where it's just like me and my like little lizard friends hanging out. Well, the dog's gonna hang out outside too. But like, I need that time where it's literally grounding and it is okay, this is the thing that helps restore my energy. And also knowing like there are parts of my job that are going to drain my energy more that I can't opt out of. So how do I create the space so that like, Christy gave the example of the birthday party. If a super introverted person has to be on for 3 hours at a big event, like that looks like a certain amount of things that I have to structure so that I have the ability and capacity to show up well in that moment. And I think for a long time I thought that those things that I like needed to do made me broken or like made me less capable than other people instead of it being like no, like I understand myself well enough to know what I need and so I'm giving myself those things. And so it's been really helpful to like shift that framework, that mental framework around the like no, like the best we can all do is to just understand what we need and then give ourselves that thing. Um, and yeah, so it's like, like Joe said, it's a work in progress, all of it. But um, but it is also where we can see progress. Like we can see the moments of, oh, I would have totally just like ignored my own boundary on that thing previously, but now I feel comfortable enough to say, like, no, I'm gonna have to stick with this. So it's also good proof points to be able to see those moments too. Yes, self-care. It's great. All right, so we have just time for one last question, which is, what is it like for you to understand that you are an example to other survivors in your practices of self-care and healing? So not necessarily what those practices are, but what is it like to understand that that's kind of the role that you're in now?
It's interesting sitting with this one. So my background, at one point in my life, I was doing like youth ministry, and the idea of being an example came with this like intense pressure to show up perfectly all the time. And the idea that like everyone is watching you, but like watching you to like see if when you mess up. Like, everyone's super aware of like you're gonna mess it up, but we want to know. And so when I lived that lifestyle, there was all this fear of messing up. So then there was a lot of faking it that would come with that because like when you messed up there was like punishment, and so then you had to like pretend like you had all your things together when you didn't have all your stuff together. And so it's interesting in this space, being an example is the way that I do it is like I just own my junk all the time. Like I'm just constantly being like, oh yeah, I totally messed that up, or honest about the fact that healing is messy and that healing can look like 3 steps back sometimes as you like pull relationships out of your life that your life was built around, and like it can make it life a lot messier before it gets a lot better, and just being like super transparent about that healing sometimes feels like falling down a cliff. um, so being an example for me has changed, like the way I view it has changed a lot, because for me the best way that I can be an example is just to be authentic and honest about how hard healing is. So that's how I view it now.
So if I'm honest, this was a fun one to kind of sit with because I was like, oh, there's lots of days I don't want to be an example. I just want to be like this person who's like, can I just have a hard time? And I think it ties into what Joe was saying about that perfectionism, or that idea that like to be an example means that you have to be perfect, is kind of in the ethos of the air that we breathe. And so it's very refreshing for me to um, like the way that I understand that example is like I'm showing up as a real person. And I show up as a real person in my office, and I show up in the real person in LTS stuff, and I show up in the real person, with my kids, and my spouse, and all the things. And so like what Joe is saying, like I own my stuff. I mean, I totally screwed, or I'll be like, oh, my brain just went away from me and I lost the word. Like I talk out loud about stuff that I'm probably sitting there going, I probably shouldn't say that out loud. Or, oh, I just thought this about this and that was totally wrong, And so it's just, but it's just showing up as a real human, right? And so then I feel like in that humanness, we give other people permission to show up as themselves, and prioritize what they, their own example. I also think it's a way to disrupt the narrative, right? So we have all these different, like, you're so strong, or you're so this, or you're so this, or, oh, you must be this. And it's when we show up as ourselves, and it is like modeling that example, in a healthy way, which I haven't always done, but like having that example or recognizing that example, but viewing it in a healthy way. Well, then when I'm doing that, I am disrupting those narratives, right? Those things that like culturally on a broader scale are placed on us. I'm able to disrupt it. So, yeah.
For me, it's a good reminder to check in and to actually take care of myself because it kind of slips through the cracks sometimes. And even in that statement, like this whole theme of perfectionism, that to be gentle with myself, that reminding myself nobody is expecting this, and that it's like it's not real anyways. It's just like smoke and steam. Um, and the funny thing about this question is that when I joined my first cohort, I thought, um, I'm going to do this 12-week workshop and I'm going to be healed. And then when that's not true, when I finished it, I thought, I'm going to do 2-3 sessions of EMDR and I'm going to be healed. And several years later, I realized, even though it had been explained to me, I think I just didn't want to receive it, that the healing's continuous, and I oftentimes wish that weren't true, but it is what it is. And, the fact that life happens and life is very complex and layers onto the healing that you've been working through. And, the reality is that we have to keep moving forward, and the work is continuous. Practicing self-care, and reprioritizing it when I haven't been is a big one. CG starts each meeting with a personal check-in, of how are you doing? That's always the very first question. We sit down, how are you doing? And that very simple question, is truly a helpful reminder for me to check in too with me, because I oftentimes just don't. But it models for me, the importance of it. And then I, in turn, like I ask people that a lot so that they too can, take a second and like, how am I?
Yes. Um, I often ask because it is my own reminder to check in. But similar to Joe, I have this background where the spaces that I was in, the idea of being an example meant pretending perfection, right? Because like we can't achieve it. And so It was this sense of like, okay, if I can only do everything perfectly all the time, then then I have proven that I deserve this role that I'm in. But of course, since it's not achievable, like the anxiety and stress level is just like through the roof all the time because it's always feeling like the shoe's going to drop, right? And you never know when it's going to happen or when somebody's going to catch you like having messed up. And so just realizing that I was in this spot now, right? Like in my life where like people were looking to me. Um, it took a lot of me dealing with my own stuff, right? And like some of these like really deep old wounds that I hadn't really looked at that much previously. And and I felt like allergic to the concept of like being an example. Like I just wanted to like it makes me like my skin itchy. It's just like no, that's for somebody else. Um, and then I had somebody frame it as like, but do you understand that you're giving people hope? And I like even when I just said like I still get like chills when I think about it. It's like no, like I didn't think of it that way. And so when I can frame it that way of like yes, if I keep doing my stuff, if I keep working on my stuff, I can provide an example of like this is where you can be too. And so if I can frame it that way, it doesn't feel quite as like eh, to me. Like it feels more like in line with the rest of how we approach our work. Um, because so often we don't really, when we're just getting started, we don't really have an idea of like what we're even like pointing ourselves toward. And so what the four of us now are like, we're in this position of being able to show people like it doesn't have to look like my life looks like, but here's a possibility. Like it may be like you can pick these three things from my life and these four things from Joe's life and like these eight things from Brittany's life and these I don't know 17 things from Christy's life and then just like mash them all together and um but yeah like this is real like reframing it was the thing that helped it feel more comfortable for me and um it makes it easier to sit with honestly because it doesn't feel super comfortable for me to sit with it sometimes.
That just reframed it for me.
Well,
So I'm like, no, I just want to have a bad day sometimes.
great.
But then you saying that reframing of hope, I think that that's what it's about, right? Like
Mhm.
that's very helpful.
Yeah. But I
Thank
think
you
it's
for
also super
that.
important to know that like I had this idea for such a long time of like if only I got to whatever imaginary X point in the future, then I would never feel overwhelmed. I would never be stressed. I wouldn't like life would just feel like easy and magical and wonderful and like sunshine and rainbows and puppy dog kisses every day. Like I don't like that's like I just had this like, oh, if only I got past the trauma, then everything is just like smooth sailing for the rest of my life. And I remember my therapist being like, you do understand that people who don't have trauma still feel overwhelmed sometimes, right? And I didn't. I honestly didn't know that. And so it's important that like even as we're like providing hope and like giving this example, that like it doesn't mean that real life isn't still happening, right? And that's all part of what the example is and looks like. And as much as I would
Just,
love to keep having
oh,
conversations,
okay.
unfortunately, I think we gotta wrap it up. But we have many more episodes to come, so we'll have so many more good conversations, and I really appreciate all of you being able and willing to share your thoughts on this topic today and what it looks like to build authentic community for Louder Than Silence. Um, so thank you all for listening to the Louder Than Silence podcast. If you'd like more information, please visit us at louderthansilence.org or follow us on Instagram at louderthansilence.org. This podcast and all our programs at LTS come from your donations, so please consider making a donation today. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast for the most current episodes. We'll see you next month.